Well, so Micah, you were asking us about our family's experience in this past summer and in South Asia. But along with that, you mentioned a trip that one of our sons got to take with the church up to Brooklyn, New York. And so tell us a little bit about that trip and how that came about.
Yeah, so we got to take a team of 5 people, including myself here from Calvary, to go and to partner with a church in Brooklyn, and kind of how that came to be. So there's a church that planted just this past year called the Borough Church in Brooklyn, and the pastor of that church, his name is Zach. Me and him have been able to do ministry together for off and on and at camp over the past 12 years. And so I got to come alongside and work with him and serve with him for many years. And as Zach had moved to New York, it had been on my heart ever since he left, just to be able to connect with him and to explore that opportunity. And so over the last year or so, as things begin to kind of open up for opportunities for us to be able to serve and maybe get out and go on a trip again. And so we just began that conversation. And so as that began to come together, it became really clear that this was going to be a great opportunity for us to come alongside their church, to partner with them, to love on them, and to come to serve however they would need. And so, it was great, and we were ready to jump on that opportunity this past summer. And so
that's wonderful. Well, tell us a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about the dynamics of the environment there in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah. We're in Fort Bend County, and we get to see, peoples from all over the world. But how was that maybe even intensified, or just give us
Absolutely. So, in Fort Bend County, we're not strangers to diversity at all, right? We have people here from every corner of the world, it seems. And so, we're not complete strangers to that. But you go to Brooklyn and you take Fort Bend County, and it's like you shove it into a little bitty box, and then also quadruple the amount of people. And so it's, you've got about 2.5 million people in Brooklyn alone, and a tight little radius there, and people from everywhere. And so it really surely presents its challenges, but also I think creates a beautiful opportunity for the church to begin to take on this great picture of the kingdom and see people from all over the world come together, which is unique because we got a chance while we were there to be able to worship with the borough. And it's a church of maybe 35, 40 people consistently on a Sunday participating in worship. But in that group, in that small group of people that come together and worship, there are probably 20 different countries represented, whether those being people that are born in those places or maybe their parents, but all sorts of different backgrounds and ethnicities and socioeconomical differences. But it was really neat to see just the love that bonded those people. We got to talk in our conversation about Nepal, that thing that draws people together beyond their differences, that unity that can be found in Christ. Right. And so to see that there was one of the things that stood out to me most. The first day that we were there as a team, we got to worship with them, and it was just set a great tone for the week to see them come together, people of all different backgrounds and experiences, but come together to worship the same God and to love one another. You would never know that these people hadn't spent every day of their lives growing up together. They loved each other deeply. And so that was great for me, just to be able to see that and really an encouragement for us. We talked about the diversity here in Fort Bend County, but sometimes it can be pocketed, and we can struggle to pull those people together. Right. And it was an encouragement for me to see that happening in real time, and to see all of these people coming together and just kind of overlooking those things and recognizing the bond that they have in Christ. And so encouraged me to be able to strive for that and to help cultivate that kind of culture here back home as well.
So you kind of described it compressed into an area. Maybe the density of the population is a little more compact there.
Absolutely.
Do you see that it's easier for those different segments of society, maybe that's not the right word, different cultures, to actually overlap and interact with one another in that setting than it is here?
Yes, for sure, because there's not enough space, right? Really, there are pockets of different people from around the world in different neighborhoods. But whenever you say a pocket there, right, it's a few blocks, and then you go another few blocks, and it's another group of people. And so ultimately, right, their lives begin to overlap a little bit more. Here, maybe in Fort Bend County, a little bit more spread out, or opportunity to do that, much more suburban. In Brooklyn, they are very, very rarely a building that stands alone. Most things are connected to each other. And I think that kind of paints a visual picture of almost how their culture and their society works. And people are, the primary mean of transportation is public. And so you're interacting with people from everywhere. There's tons of people who walk. And so we're here, I think our lives can become much more individual. We can become kind of siloed with our own families and maybe even our own ethnic or cultural groups. And so there it seems to be like a lot of that is broken down just because they're shoved into this small place with a bunch of people, and inevitably they begin to intermingle and build relationships and do life together. And so that was an encouraging thing, but understanding that there are different challenges here, but also, I think a thing that gave hope that it is possible to see people of differences come together and to be able to love one another and live together in that way as well.
Yeah. So you talked about working with Zach, and I think he's got a partner there in the church as well named Chaz.
Chaz, yeah.
Okay. And those guys, no doubt, have been given God-given vision for that area, for that part of the city at least. And they probably see at a high level the just immense needs of the people and the need for the gospel. Yeah. They can't do it themselves.
Yeah.
And to be honest, neither can a church of 35 or 40.
Yeah.
What's the practical perspective that a believer in that context needs to have about looking at all the hundreds or thousands of people around them that need the gospel, but what is God calling an individual believer there too?
Yeah. I think that's a good question, a challenge, right? And even for us too, right? I think we can often look around at the needs around us and become overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
But I think part of the culture of their church, and I think that this is really at the core of our DNA as well, is relationships. And so, sure, maybe none of them individually or maybe not even collectively can solve all of the problems in their community, and maybe we can't either. But I don't think that that's the primary goal, right? Like the goal is we begin to build relationships and share the truth of the gospel with people, that it'll begin to change lives one by one. And you collectively do that, well, then it begins to grow. Then it's not 35, 40 people anymore. It's, it's all of the people that then those people touch and that they have opportunities to minister to. And so it was neat to see as we were there over the week, sure, they come together, they're all part of the borough, but as we begin to meet these people, they all have other people that they are ministering to, whether in their workplaces and some of them even other ministries, whether the guy who serves their students there is also a chaplain in a nursing home and he gets to minister to people from all over the world. And we got a chance to go and work with them for a day there. And as we minister with them, we see that he's making real life change in people there. And they have a student volunteer program there at the nursing home with some of their students from the church that get to participate in that. They're getting to minister there. And as we talked to them, it was really became clear to me, though, that there's this realness, a desire for community and for relationship. And in that relationship, it was inevitable because it was so important to them that God was going to become a central part of those relationships. And so I think if they start there, and I think the same thing for us, if we can look at that, what are the things that we can control? Where are the places that we can make an impact? Who are the people that we do come in contact with that we can share and encourage with the gospel, with the truth of who Christ is? If we can start there, then I think over time, the bigger issues that maybe can overwhelm us and discourage us will begin to be taken care of if we are faithful to start at the gospel and where God has called us to.
Good. And in the context of relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because isn't that what people desire?
Yeah.
The greatest desire of the human heart, to have community, but to know and to be known.
Yeah.
And we don't get that any more intimately and any more in abundance than through Christ.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things is that was profound to me at the borough was you see these people who most of them either come from no church background or some sort of dysfunctional, maybe even corrupted version of what church is or and religion and those sort of things. And so they had this starving for community, for a place. And I think that joy that I talked about earlier is we got to worship with them and even we got to have a little baby shower / barbecue with them after that service. There was just this overwhelming sense of joy. And I think a lot of that was wrapped up in the fact that they had found this community. They had found relationship that they had desired. And I think the reason that permeates the rest of their life is because they found such a great need in that relationship, in that community, that's all centered on Christ, that they now want other people to participate in that as well. Absolutely. And so they have this longing to go and to share that and invite people into that kind of community and relationship.
Awesome. And I don't want to ask you, as maybe we'll wrap up here shortly, but I don't want to ask you to share someone else's story, but I do want to ask you, maybe share someone else's story. In the team that you took, what was maybe one significant personal interaction or something like that? And then in the church, I don't know, the borough there, someone that's a part of that, what's one standout personal testimony story that you saw Christ working, changing lives through personal relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for some of our team, this was a new experience for most of them. We mentioned that Micah, your son, got a chance to participate and maybe has more time, being in a mission environment. But for the rest of our team, or two other members of our team, this is our first time to really be in this sort of context. And so, in one of the most maybe unlikely scenarios, and there are many other opportunities and maybe things that they would want to share that were impactful for them, but something that I was able to observe. The day that we were at the nursing home, which of all things that we did that week was probably, when you're thinking about what would excite a teenager, maybe the lowest on that list. But one of the members of our team, we had the opportunity to share testimonies, and it was really cool to see one of our students, Zane, get to go up and share and just kind of talk about what God had done in his life. And to me, it was cool to see this boldness and then follow up sharing his testimony by going and having one-on-one conversations with people here that are 50, 60 years older than him, maybe 70 years older, but just talking about his life and sharing what God had done in it and getting to hear their story as well. And so it was neat for me to see God moving and just that spirit of interaction and relationship kind of drawing a student outside of their comfort zone. And I think maybe that was why it was profound to me, is it wasn't the place that would have been most comfortable for them all week. It was maybe the place that would have been the biggest challenge. But to see a student step outside of their comfort zone, have a conversation, see the importance of sharing and talking about what God is doing in their life, and to encourage someone else, that was really neat. And then for someone at the borough, man, there's so many, but a couple that stand out to me. There's a girl that we, maybe from a distance, and some of our people even here at Calvary would recognize her face, and if maybe they've got to watch the video that we've shared with the church about kind of the story of the start of the borough and how they got going. But a girl that they were able to baptize just a couple of years ago, about a year ago, when we showed up on Sunday at church, it was really neat to see that now that same person who just came to know the Lord or took that next step in following the Lord just recently was actually leading their church in worship. And we showed up early enough, and this was something that was profound to me. We showed up early enough, and they were practicing and getting ready, and I get the opportunity to serve sometimes with our worship team here, and I've been a part of those practices, and sometimes they can become, you're trying to get things done, whether technically or music, and it becomes a practice. But what was really profound to me is in their practice, I could just sense and see in her spirit, like it was worship even then. There's only a handful of people in the room. Their team is prepping and trying to get ready, but she was worshiping, and it came out in the time when we got into the service that she began to lead, and she was truly leading by example as she led people into worship. And so it was profound to me to see someone who had come alongside, and become a part of the borough just recently, but that they have been able to disciple and encourage and walk with and lead her into a place that now she's leading other people. And it was really this cool kind of transition or full circle kind of moment that you see the results of discipleship, and people they're continuing to walk with her, continuing to encourage her in that way. And then there were a couple of others. There was a guy there that just a few months ago, actually in the early part of the summer, actually got baptized and become a believer just shortly before that. And the borough had actually brought him on as an intern this summer. And it was neat for me to see someone, when we think of an intern in our culture, it's often someone who's a pretty mature believer for their age, maybe someone that's pursuing vocational ministry and that sort of thing. But it was neat for me to see that they had taken this new believer and just put their arm around him and were loving on him and given him opportunities to lead and serve as they led and served him throughout the summer as well. And gosh, I could go on and on. I'm trying to think of even more. There's a girl there who is serving in the role of their financial administrator now, which doesn't sound exciting, right? But it's an important role in a church.
Sure.
We understand that from being in a church staff role, that's an important person that helps keep things in order and in line for the church. But she came from a really broken spiritual background. Had some really difficult experiences in churches that really kind of turned out not to be much of a church and not a place that was going to help her grow in a relationship with the Lord, but has gotten to know Chaz and Zach well over the last couple of years and been able to be brought into this community. And I got to just share a good conversation with her when we had a little bowling outing with their students and some of the other people from their church. We got put on the same lane together and just had great conversation and such an encouraging person and such a joyful person. And it just was really cool to me that she didn't find that because they have the coolest programs or that they have the biggest church or the and all of the fancy things. She found that because she found real people who love Jesus, who love her and were willing to walk through life with her. And so that was encouraging for me.
Yeah. And man, thanks for sharing those stories because that is what, again, the human heart desires is personal relationship. But that is just so amped up. I mean, Jesus said he came to give us life and more abundantly. That abundant life comes through knowing him, but then knowing other people who sincerely know him and love him, who have found peace, just like you've described some of these lives that were changed there. How amazing that is. And thanks for sharing those stories.
Absolutely.
Is there any last thing that you'd like to kind of just leave with us about the Brooklyn area, about this mission effort? Anything that would be encouraging to us as part of the Christ Church here?
Yeah, to me, like there were tons of things, and I could go on and on about the week and what God was doing. But for us as a church that gets to partner with them, and not only just as a financial and a prayer partner, but also just fellow believers, and to know that God is moving and working, and know that we are a part of a global church. It's not just us here in this. And so it's encouraging for me to see God working and moving in that way, in a different place. But also one of the things that really kind of stood out to me is, Zach has been there for the last few years. He actually moved to New York in 2019, and then we all know what happened to the world shortly after that. And then in 2021 is really when the borough came to be, is God drew Zach and Chaz together they were both actually working on planting churches separately before that, but met each other in that process, and the Lord brought them together and they're able to start the borough. And so that was a unique story, and that maybe for another time, more detail on that. But it was just awesome to me to see this baby church in so many ways, right? It's so new, so fresh. But just the relationships and the connections that they're making in the city, that they are already so much thinking outside of just themselves.
Very good.
It's so easy for us to become focused on what's happening inside of our walls and try to balance all of these things. And certainly those things have to be attended to. But just a deep need and recognition on their end to get outside of just their space and to go and to meet the needs and to build relationships in their community that are going to open opportunities for people to come to know the Lord. We saw that on Wednesday. We got to partner with them as the borough helped put on a basketball tournament that the NYPD was putting on, and just to see the relationships they're building in the community, that they're just loving on and serving those people. I mean, that's a massive police department with tons of people, but they took on this task to go and to serve them in this way. And this is, oftentimes when I think of a church of 30 or 40 people, I think that they would just be trying to figure out how to stay alive. But they're not doing that. They realize that the real way to stay alive is to go and do what God has called us to do, not to just sit around and try to figure out all of our internal problems and balance that, but just to be faithful to the call that God has given them. So that was encouraging for me.
Awesome, man. I guess I think of the verse, out of the mouth of babes comes, things that in the sense of church. I mean, this church would maybe be considered a baby church or a young church, but yet the things that they're seeing and that God is calling them to do are instructive for all of us as churches, that our work is not inside to maintain an organization, but it is outside to be used for the glory of Christ and His kingdom work. Man, that's great. Thanks for sharing those stories with us, Micah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for tuning in today. If these sorts of conversations are a blessing to your life, please subscribe to this channel so that you can catch more of them. And also, if what you've heard has impacted your life in any way, would you please comment about that in the section below? Thanks a bunch. God bless you.